SIP episode 105 is all about harvest prep. When does the crew get called? How do you set the time for the pick? It's one of the most important decisions of the harvest, but the signs for when you do it actually start far earlier than you think. And yes, you will be blessing the first grapes with sparkling wine when they come in. We've got none other than Jackie from Jaclynn Renée Wines to help us. Sit back, it's SIP episode 105. It is getting kind of harvest time. And I don't know if you're like me, where back to school things that made me mad as a child, it makes me mad as an adult. But I do know that harvest is a cyclical time, and winemakers and vineyard owners, they have to get ready for this. And we're going to talk to a guest this evening about how that happens. Many of you may remember this guest from episode 5. This is episode 105 this evening on SIP. So she has graciously decided to come back, and we did not scare her away, to talk a little bit about harvest prep, but we're all drinking, or many of us are drinking, her wine in advance. Some of you may be saying, how did they get her wine in advance? And the way that happens is you have to actually go to the Cellar Angels website. And if you go to the Cellar Angels website, you will see a curated selection of wines strictly from Napa and Sonoma. I'm not sharing anything, Mission Control. Mission doing things. There we go. So now, one of the great things about all of the wines, or 99% of the wines on Cellar Angels, and just like this evening's wine, if you look at the back label, NBC, no barcode. This is not a wine in distribution. So you're not going to get this anywhere. And we're going to get into this later. She only made 80 cases of it. So you might not even get it from her after a short period of time. But this is the type of wines that we feature on Cellar Angels, a private direct-to-consumer wine curator specifically isolating and featuring wines from Napa and Sonoma. So now here you have the SIP kit, which is available September 2nd through October 7th, and it's got 5 wines in it. You grab that SIP kit, it gets sent to your house, and you will have wines for the next 5 Fridays in a row. Tonight, we're featuring this wine, Jaclynn Renée 2018 Franklin's Cuvée. We're going to find out all about Franklin. My guess is it has nothing to do with Franklin's Tower from the Grateful Dead. Could be wrong, but we'll see. But this is from the Dry Creek area of Sonoma. So we're going to talk a little bit about Dry Creek, but this is how you can get the wines in advance. And if I haven't said hello to Sherry, I can't say last name, Sherry, and it might be Cherry. So I apologize. Debbie, I did say hello. Dahlia, how are you doing? I think I got most of the folks on. It's so good to see the crowd. And I think you don't want to hear from me. You'd rather hear from our guest this evening. So why don't we bring her in out of the green room, where she has been busy with the charcuterie tray, a mani-pedi, and should look fantastic. It gives me a great honor, privilege, pleasure, you name it, to welcome tonight's guest, Jaclynn von Sant-Downes. Oh, Jaclynn Renée von Sant-Downes, Van Sant, who is, I'm sure, turning on her camera.
Oh,
unbelievable.
We just that.
Everyone can hear you, Mr. Control. Jackie, how are you? Say hello to the crowd.
hi, everybody. Doing well. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday is right. Thank goodness. If it is Friday, it means SIP happens.
Yes.
So without fail, and oh, by the way, big announcement coming up in a week and a half on Wine Club. For the Wine Club members, the QR code changed yesterday. So you need to get your QR code update on your Wine Club canteen. This holds a full bottle of wine. It is ideal for parent-teacher conferences, going to your kids' soccer games. Jackie, do you ever take alcohol to your children's events?
Sadly, no. I work with it enough.
All right. Well, let's since we last spoke to you, it was in April of 2020. Little bit has changed, and thankfully we can still commune virtually. But you were in Healdsburg area at the time, and now you are where?
So we just moved a year ago to Texas. So we are in the Texas Hill Country, living in Wimberley, which is about 40 minutes south of Austin.
Okay, and how did you decide to move there?
So again, being from Texas, so I was born and raised in Houston and then moved out to California after I graduated from Texas Tech in 2007. I thought I would only be there for a couple of years and turned into about 15 years getting into the wine industry. But we always knew we kind of wanted to come back, and met my husband and had our kids out there. And we just were really kind of after the fire seasons, like a couple fire seasons, and then COVID, we were really feeling like it was time to get back closer to family. So I had some friends that had a vineyard property out here in Wimberley, and I really had never been visiting out much in this area. I mean, I'd been to Austin many times, but never to Wimberley. And in raising our children in a small town like Healdsburg, we knew we wanted to stay in that small town feel. And plus, with my career being a winemaker, I knew I needed to be in wine country. So we came down and visited with our friends in Wimberley and went wine tasting at a couple wineries around, and just fell in love with the town.
No, it's interesting. We talk often about cognitive dissonance in Cellar Angels. So you are a winemaker in probably and arguably one of the greatest wine regions in the world. And then you're coming down to Wimberley to taste wine. And how do you not let that influence your perception of everything? How do you start with just a blank palette, blank slate?
I mean, you just have to. For me, it's not been easy. I'm not going to lie. You know, for a career winemaker, being in one of the best growing regions in the world, and I mean, Texas is evolving. It is a struggle sometimes, like not driving down, you know, from our house and just being in constant vineyards, because that was kind of, you know, that's where I've been the last 15 years, and it's so beautiful. Right. But for me, I just think coming back to my roots and being home, like I will always call Texas my home, I think has been nostalgic, but also being a part of a industry that's really starting to boom, and that needs really good wine, you know, more good winemakers and viticulturists and things that are coming in and making a change in the industry. I think being a part of that and seeing the change, and especially I've been here for a year now, seeing, you know, I work at a full-time winery too. I got hired as the head winemaker at Driftwood Estate Winery, which is just up north, like 10 minutes in Driftwood, and just getting to see the evolution over a year. I mean, through last year having such a rainy season, and this year being in one of the worst droughts, you know, Texas has seen in a long time. Kind of course, like all I can think of is like, oh gosh, I just left these beautiful vineyards in California. But at the same time, it's like, okay, this is such an amazing learning period of what can we be doing differently? What can we be doing with irrigation? What can we be doing with like we were going to talk about harvest planning for these sorts of situations. I mean, I learned so much in my 15 years in California, but now I get to just evolve and now, you know, learn how to make wine in Texas and learn how the vines grow here, and just kind of bulk up my resume and just keep evolving, because I feel like that's the only way to get better is to keep learning. And so being here is a challenge. Like, you know, it's not a challenge being in Texas, but the weather and all the things that come with growing, especially in the Texas Hill Country, throws a lot of curveballs at you, but it's amazing to be able to navigate that and make some really amazing wine. So,
well, I think the evolving part is critical. Obviously, just if we stop evolving, we die. And Leon, good to see you. Lori, good to see you. And there's a couple Loris, the Lorree, and then Lori W. Hello. And I also saw Alicia, good to see you. Azucena, literally the prettiest name tonight. And I'm sure I massacred that pronunciation. But I'm interested in, okay, now it's getting to be harvest time. And there is a obvious wonderful cadence and cyclical nature to being a farmer. So you get to, I mean, it almost forces you to slow down automatically, because you're only working on Mother Nature's time, not in your time. So now as things start to get closer to harvest, there's got to be telltale signs in the vineyard. When do you start planning calendar wise, Jackie for her wines. We'll do Texas first. When do you start planning that? When do you start seeing signs to say, okay, wow, it's June. This is happening fast. How does that all work?
Right. Well, I think we kind of talked about this a bit yesterday. Like, I mean, I'm already planning for harvest next year in my mind with fruit coming in right now. So I'm kind of already thinking of, oh, this is how things are looking now. What can we do differently next year? So I think it starts even a year in advance.
For those of you that were not involved in Jackie and my practice session yesterday, this will all be new to you. So Jackie and I talked about this yesterday.
Exactly.
So how do you plan a year in advance on harvest?
I just think, well, for a year in advance, I mean, things that are coming in now that I've already planned for, just kind of having in my mind or making notes of what I'll do next year. But let's say after the season's over, after we're done with harvest, say Texas, September, California, October. So we will start planning for, okay, what the vines are going to go dormant, and then knowing kind of we can get some of those whites and things bottled in the winter, and then kind of January, like let's take like we were talking about vacation, like that's part of it too. Like how can we have some downtime in the winter, and then when the vines start waking up, depending on the climate, and again, having warmer years lately, they've been honestly coming out of dormancy a lot earlier. So even as early as February.
Interesting.
So what's happening with bud break? When like we are constantly in the vineyards checking on bud break. So as early as February, walking vines, seeing how everything's looking, monitoring the weather, constantly monitoring the weather. And then once bud break happens, monitoring the weather even more for frost. Because if temperatures are going to drop, and that's what happened in Texas last year. They had a really warm winter, and then all of a sudden this crazy freeze happened. And I think everyone remembers the crazy freeze last year in Texas. All the earlier ripenings, like all the whites and even some of the earlier reds, like Sangiovese and some of the lighter reds were already pushing buds. And so everything that was already out and budded was damaged by the freeze. And so those are kind of things that we have to adjust for now. So this year, knowing that we had that freeze in February, people didn't prune, even though buds were pushing, people did not prune their vines until later this year, just in case. Everyone's like, after Easter, that was kind of the theme this year, like we'll prune after Easter, even though you have buds pushing and, it looks kind of crazy with, wood from last year. No one wanted to have the same outcome as what happened with the freeze. So planning for those things, constantly monitoring the weather, and then walking the vines, seeing when bud break happens, and then, when bloom's going to happen, monitoring the weather. Are we in Texas, there's a big issue with hail. And hail during bloom, or even in California, if there's going to be a weird summer rain that happens occasionally, not obviously in recent years, but is that going to happen during bloom? Because that could affect the flowering process and the set, the grape berry set and all of that. So constantly monitoring that. And then once we can start, if needed, like the hill country is very mild weather, if we need to do like a spray program for like bugs and things like that, for pests, because there's a lot of pest pressure here with the weather and more of the humidity. What's the wind look like? Like literally I have on my watch, like the wind speed every single day. I'm checking the wind speed. I mean, there's things that you're constantly monitoring. So even though we say like harvest prep, you think it's like, oh, just a month in advance. Like it's literally, we're prepping so far in advance and watching everything in the vineyard. And then as far as like the winery goes, I mean.
Okay, wait, I want to back up a second.
Yes.
I need Jackie to breathe. This is a 4-hour show, so slow down. One of the things I want to like flip over to Healdsburg for a second. As it relates to planning, I see a lot of the sparkling houses will bless the grapes with bubbles. Yes. Do you do anything like that?
I definitely do. So that's a tradition I've been doing my whole entire, I guess, career. Every vintage I've made my wine, and even other wines too. We will always bless the grapes with a champagne of some type, every single first wine that comes in.
Perfect. Definitely. And now that, we've talked a little bit about weather, and I want to show you may have seen this since you're monitoring weather. So here's Dry Creek Valley over the next 5 days. So now as a vineyard manager slash winemaker who sources fruit and has crews on the ground, what happens when you've got, full ripeness to a degree or getting darn close, and you have 97, 100, 104, 2 days in a row?
Right.
Does that scare the pants off of you? Does it say,
I mean,
okay, does the vine
yes
shut
and
down?
no. Yes and no. I mean, knowing that there'd be a 94-degree day, or knowing in advance like that we're going to have a heat spike, you'd probably go out and check the vineyard right before that happens and check the bricks, which is the sugar level and the acid, to see where it's at. If there's obviously no rain in sight, that's a good sign. But after a certain degrees, and especially up in the hundreds, photosynthesis shuts down. So you're not going to have
shut down. Okay.
You're not going to have any move in bricks. You definitely can get some decline in the acidity. But as long as you're watering, if you have irrigation and you can continue watering, then you would just tell your vineyard manager or whoever, okay, keep the water on if it's not ready to pick, and let's just get through this heat spike. If your fruit's really exposed, say like, especially whites, you might be getting a little bit of sunburn and things like that. So you're constantly monitoring those things. In Texas right now with our drought, like for example, at Driftwood Estate Winery where I am, our creek is dry. So what do you do if you can't put the water on, So we started harvest on July 12th, which is my birthday. I never in my whole life thought I would ever start harvesting on July 12th.
And here's something else you don't have in Texas. You've got a 94-degree day that gets down to 55. Yeah, so you're looking at 40 to 50 degree swings.
I think our lowest has been 74.
No, so that's crazy from that standpoint, because all of us familiar with Sonoma and Napa, they'll pick at night for the most parts at the prestige houses, and they do it because it's so cold.
Exactly.
And they want that fruit set. You can't do that in Texas. So how do you pick when it's 74?
You just have to. Yesterday too, we've been having really weird weather, and I had a vineyard. I was actually picking one of the first vintages of Texas wine for my label. We're starting a Texas label too, which we can get into a little bit later. But I went out there at 9 o'clock in the morning and saw the forecast was possible rain in the afternoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I looked at the fruit. If we don't pull this off now and it rains, this is going to be done. And so at 11 o'clock, it was 96 degrees and we picked in 96 to 100-degree heat. But we had to get the fruit off, so it's those things that you kind of just have to make those.
And how do you get labor? Peter asked this question. How do you get labor to do that?
So in California, because the state is so, populated with vines and viticulturists and vineyard management crews and labor that is designated for fruit and grape picking, you can just call a crew and get people. Usually in Texas, It is not that way. It's just not as developed. So yesterday we literally texted every single friend we knew and told them to come out and pick. And that's kind of how we did it. And a lot of wineries here do that. They have people come to the winery and just volunteer to pick. But we have a crew at our winery too. So we have 3 guys. So we just all loaded up in a truck and went. But usually in California, most of the wineries have either a staff on hand or, some of their cellar crew might go out or they hire a vineyard management company who has a crew that will pick the grapes.
And let me do this for the new people that are here, of which I see quite a bit, fans, which is fantastic. The Cellar Angels faithful on Friday nights have nicknamed themselves Sipsters. And you will see Sipsters talking to other Sipsters in the chat. But one thing you need to know is actually what is a Sipster? And a Sipster, we go way back in time to Aristotle. We talk about our wine heroes, our angels, if you will, our better angels. And hero in Greek mythology is not like it is today. These people aren't Avengers. They don't show up in capes. They are protectors and defenders with the strength of 2. And the Sipsters are defending and protecting the limited production wineries. They have the ability to buy any wine they want, but they are exceptional supporters and wine ambassadors. We call them eudaimonic. They are good souls, and everything they do is to support the limited production wineries like Jackie. So you, the new folks, can be Sipsters, and it's a badge of honor. I do want to talk a little bit about Texas grapes and varieties versus what you grew up with in Healdsburg. So what have you, and by the way, Driftwood Winery, I have this strange feeling that there's not a body of water within 10 miles. So where does the name Driftwood come from?
Actually there's in this area, there's a lot of rivers and creeks
Okay.
in the area. So there's actually a lot of driftwood in that area. It's definitely dried up a lot over the years, but we do have a creek that goes through the property, usually a pretty decent creek that goes right through our property that used to be like a couple of thousand acres, which is now about 200 acres.
Oh, wow.
And we have 18 acres planted, but yes, used to have a lot of water, a lot more water. Not so much as of right now. All the water is dried up right now, unfortunately.
All right. And Sipsters, you have the opportunity to do poll questions. So I'm going to launch our first poll before we compare and contrast the Texas varieties to California varieties. So this is where your participation is needed. Wrong answers will financially cost you, and we have a way of deducting things from checking accounts. So if a wine is labeled by a single vineyard, what percentage of the grapes must come from that vineyard? So here's an example of a winery, and folks that you may remember from last week, their Cabernet Sauvignon is from the Escher Vineyard in Napa. So what percent of grapes must come from that vineyard if you have the vineyard label on it? Jackie knows this, so I'm not going to, and she can't answer. So for those of you that
tried.
For those of you that are texting her to say, hey, what is the answer? That's not allowed. I'm going to give this 5, 4, 3, 2. Justin is answering in the chat. 1, 0 time. All right. Jackie, do you know the answer?
Well, it's different in each state. A lot of single vineyard want you to use 100% of the vineyard to be able to call it single vineyard. But a lot of other people say 85%.
Technically, according to the Court of Master Sommeliers for the California region, the answer legally is 95%.
Oh, for vineyard designate.
That's right. For vineyard designate.
For all of my contracts, it's 100%. So, but that's good to know that that's by law.
So if you were going to do a vineyard designate wine, 100% of the wine, of the fruit in that bottle you've chosen from that vineyard and not bumped it with anything?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good to know. The next one we're going to do is a little easier. True false question for our advanced class. We can use our sense of sight to assess a wine's acidity. True or false? And I think it's interesting. We've got a nice little scale here that I think was from Wine Folly, Madeline Puckett's group. And coffee is low acid, which is new music to my ears because I had about 80 ounces of it today. So I'm very happy that that 9 cups is low. But can you tell a wine's acidity just by looking at it? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hum the tune to Jeopardy. I'm going to put Jackie in a spot again.
I'm going to say, well, I would say false.
You would be correct.
I would definitely say false. Yes.
You cannot tell a wine's acidity just by looking at it. That is simply something that you are going to have to garner by tasting. Mm-hmm. Last poll question. There's quite a few people that I think are 2 for 2, but this next one, another true false. A wine with high tannins would correctly be described as dry. And there's a little update on tannins. I actually think I forgot the answer to this one, so that could make this question very interesting.
You got a 50% chance.
There's a fun fact in our household, Jackie. If I have a 50% chance, I'm 100% wrong. It's unbelievable. Ask Mission Control. All right, 5. Wow, this is breaking out. People are torn up on this one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is also a Court of Master Sommelier exam question. The answer is false. A wine that is high in tannins is not described as dry. It would be described as A, tannic, or B, astringent. So a dry wine, interestingly, has nothing to do with tannin, and an acidic wine you cannot tell by looking at it. So there's a little bit of educational knowledge there from the Cellar Angels crew. Thank you. Jim B, 0 for 3 isn't too bad, is it? No, Jim, it is not. I would imagine your essay questions and write-in answers are going to be superb, so you're fine there. So you mentioned earlier that you graduated tech and 3 days later you went out to California. And I'm curious, did you know after graduating tech you were going wine, or how did you decide I'm going to California, and why?
Yeah, so this is kind of the story of, I guess if we can get into that. I mean, I grew up playing volleyball. I really thought I was going to be playing volleyball in college, and things just kind of changed and shifted a little bit. And I ended up taking summer school at Texas Tech to graduate. And my aunt had opened up a wine bar in Katy, Texas. And kind of when I would go home for Christmas break or any of those things when she was opening up the wine bar, she would invite me over, and she would have wine reps over tasting like the most gorgeous European wines, and kind of develop my palate from like Franzia White Zinfandel, which I mean, I was a college student. I'm not like ashamed to admit that's honestly just, what I drank. And so like when I would go back to tech, I'd try to buy like a little nicer wines and kind of really start developing my palate. And she just kind of started getting me into it. And when I was in summer school, I remember her calling me and being like, hey, I got you a job in California at a winery as an intern. They're going to call you. And like, it really wasn't like, hey, do you want to do it? It was like, you're going to do it.
So she called you and said, I've got you a job.
I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was like I think it was like, I'm just going to do it. I don't remember if it was, she asked, or I just remember being in summer school being like, okay, they're going to call you. And literally the only question they asked me was, what is your boot size? That is literally like, not what is your experience, or like, what is your boot size? That's about the only question they asked me. And so 3 days after I graduated college, I moved out to California with one suitcase and didn't know a single soul, and moved in with the winemaker and his wife.
What winery?
So it was Moritzen Winery in Dry Creek. So that's kind of what really made me fall in love with Dry Creek, was Moritzen Winery. There's Zinfandels and their Cabernets and all of that. But my aunt, who is on the call, I know she is here, Aunt Robin, she is one of the most amazing people. I have her to thank for getting me into the wine career. Because honestly, I would have never ended up here without her. And she's just such an amazing person. And her name's Robin Renée. So I love having my label Jaclynn Renée, so I can have a little piece of her in it as well. But that's kind of what took me out to California. And again, being from Texas, I'd never been out there. And I thought, like, watching the OC back in the day, and like, I thought it was going to be like Southern California, how like the palm trees and all that. Going up to Northern California, I'm like, oh, they're listening to Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson. And I kind of felt like I was in Texas too, in Sonoma County. It really is kind of more of that like farmer community. So within the first week of harvest, I mean, it was tough. 2007 was such an amazing year, but hot year. I remember scrubbing bins in 110 degree heat, but I knew the first week that that's what I was going to do forever. I just fell in love with it.
And by the way, I think we all need a cool aunt like Aunt Robin. I'm currently taking applications. Aunt Denise Mission Control is fantastic. I'm curious, from the Moritzen standpoint, what you graduated college in probably the May timeframe. You're there 3 days later.
Well, it was actually after summer school. So I graduated in August. So I literally went out 3 days after I graduated, and we were prepping for harvest. So it was August.
Okay. And so you're prepping for harvest. So what did you pick up right away from them on how important harvest is and what needs to happen?
I mean, you figure out immediately, but to be an intern, and especially then in being at a small winery, you wear many hats. It's not like, oh, you just have this one job and you're going to just do this one job. It's like, you're going to do many things. And I feel like too, like growing up with three brothers, I know some of my brothers, I'm a triplet and then I have a younger brother. I know some of my brothers are on here too. I feel like growing up with being the only girl and then also training for volleyball, I was like, this really trained me for harvest, because it's no joke. I mean, you don't realize how much really goes into making a bottle of wine. I mean, you're dragging hoses, you're cleaning tanks, scrubbing tanks, getting inside, shoveling tanks, and especially as an intern, you're doing everything from the ground up. So you're doing all that grunt work. And I mean, immediately, I think they saw in me my potential of like how hard I worked. And I think that's why they immediately started giving me more and more and more as an early, like as an intern, a green intern. I had no experience. And so they let me start running lab numbers and all those things and checking the bricks. And that's usually not things they were letting interns do immediately. And so I feel like because of that experience, that really kind of helped me, decide too that I wanted to do it. But immediately after harvest, they hired me full time too. So which was great.
And I'm curious, harvesting standpoint from a prep perspective. I mean, I read a great article many years ago from Bo Barrett at Chateau Montelena, where now he's got, 40 plus vintages under his belt, takes all the notes manually. He's got binders upon binders upon binders of years of stuff. And there's a point to where you get so in sync with the vineyards that, when you get bud break here, that it's going to be 79 days later in, type of stuff. So how long did it take you to get to that rhythm, if you will, and to be able to walk the vines and say, okay, we're a little bit ahead, we're a little bit behind, kind of educate us a little bit about that. And when you start walking the wine or the vineyards with a real serious eye on setting pick dates.
Yeah. So it happened pretty quickly, but you need a couple years under your belt with the same vineyards, obviously, to start developing that. You need to be able to see, and obviously, again, weather patterns are not going to be the same every year. So you're constantly tracking that. It's going to shift, but knowing also, okay, this has been a really cold winter, a really rainy winter. It's been warmer. Bud break is probably going to happen later or sooner. I mean, bud break is kind of the first thing that you're going to look at to know, okay, this is kind of what this year is going to look like. We had an early bud break, so we're going to probably have an early harvest. We had a late bud break, so we're probably going to be 2 weeks behind or so. But then we're constantly checking those things, like I said before, seeing flowerings happening and all that. But it took me a couple years at Moritzen, because we were able to consistently have the same vineyards, and as an intern and then as a full-time employee, we're constantly also doing grape berry samples and all that in those same vineyards. So you're constantly walking the vineyards. And when I decided to start my brand in 2013, I picked vineyards that I had already had established and knew from Moritzen or from Comstock, my next winery that I worked at after Moritzen. So I knew already what to expect from those vineyards.
And when do you start biting into the fruit?
Pretty early. I mean, probably not so. Okay. So after flowering, you have berry set, and then you have veraison, when the berries, if they're red, they turn from green to red. And if they're white, they kind of turn a little bit of an opaque color, and then they start getting softer. If they're really hard, there's no point in tasting them. They're going to be super tart and sour. We know, okay, we're not really ready to taste them. I mean, you can, there's never a rule of not to taste them, but once everything's through veraison and everything is kind of through, that's kind of the time to be like, okay, let's start analyzing and picking, samples and tasting. And you might check them every 2 weeks or even once a month, and then 2 weeks. And then as you get closer, you might check them every week, and then closer, every couple of days until harvesting. But you're constantly walking the vineyards and tasting and pulling analysis and checking the sugars and the acid level and see what's happening.
Interesting. And so that's when you get a little bit scared with regards to when it's time and you say, okay, hey, get moving, people. This is, and how much of it is mouthfeel, taste, or refractometer and equipment?
Right. So that's the thing that is interesting. So, I mean, yes, of course, we go by the numbers, but you need to be out there tasting, because even though the numbers say one thing, the flavors might not be there, especially in like aromatic whites, like Sauvignon Blanc and Muscat and things like that. you really want in Viognier, you want the flavors to be there. So even though the bricks might be where you want them in your head,
Right.
it might not be where they should be phenolically or in through, you know, the correct ripeness without tasting them. And that's something that now being in Texas and working harvest at a full-time winery in Texas, I've always had that control and have been able to walk my vines in California that I can't be out there for anymore. So that's been something I've had to let go and trust people that I've developed relationships for over the last 15 years that I really trust, but they're sending me the numbers and they're letting me know, sending me pictures and tasting and things like that. And I know that I can trust them, but it's really hard to like not be out there and actually like tasting the fruit because I've done that for so long, but you know, I'm doing it here, which is great. But you have to be out there tasting and smelling and seeing what's happening. But it's both chemistry and tasting.
Interesting. What is the most challenging part of harvest prep, other than not being in the vineyard, walking rows and biting clusters?
Challenging. I mean, there's so much things we haven't even talked about, like cleaning. Like 80% of winemaking is cleaning and sanitizing. So from, you know, we know we're going to be bringing in fruit here in Texas, July, usually August in California. Yeah, July.
Sounds
August
crazy.
in California. It does sound crazy. So we're starting to clean all our bins, clean our cellar, pressure wash everything, sanitize everything. You know, we're ordering barrels. Barrels are ordered at least by February, the year of. So we're ordering barrels for our for projected fruit.
And
there's
let me back up a second to the cleaning aspect, because I don't think people recognize what, like you said, what goes into. It's not all glamour, right? I mean, you're sitting there.
No, y'all should have seen my hair earlier. I had just gotten out of cleaning the press before I got home, and I was literally pulling like grape skins and everything out of my hair. I was like, it's not all glamour.
Not all glamour at all. And so you're pressure washing and cleaning the tanks and everything, not only because cleanliness promotes, you know, a good and healthy environment, but you're also preventing what type of germs, bacteria, and things of that nature which can absolutely ruin the entire growing
I mean,
season.
it just think of it as a food product. You need to make sure that everything is clean and sanitized. I mean, you could have any microbial bacteria growing. I mean, it's invisible, like you can't see it. And so we're constantly, even day to day, like today, we were pressing fruit and crushing fruit. We made sure to go in, you know, at 6 a.m. before we even knew we were going to crush at 9 and sanitizing all of our equipment. I mean, it's a constant thing to keep everything clean. Even if we're going to go grab a pitcher of wine, like to sample something, we will sanitize the little cup that we're going to dip in. I mean, and I'm kind of crazy about sanitation. I have literally alcohol bottles covering the winery because I just want it to be accessible to grab, because every single thing needs to be sanitized. You just never know what can cause microbial bacteria or spoilage. And I try to keep a really clean winery, because if you've tasted through my wines, I know a lot of I might be new to you, but a lot of my wines are very clean, and that's kind of the winemaking style. I like to make really elegant, clean wines. And a lot of that is most of that is because of sanitation as well.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's extremely important at the limited production winery versus the mass production wineries that have tons of equipment, and it's like class 10,000 clean room type of thing. Very sterile wines in that capacity. MJ, thank you so much for that tidbit. Susan, nice to see you. Leon, I don't know if I said hello to you, and Kathleen, say hello. Very good to have you here. I can't believe you pick wines in July. That's just freaking me out.
Oh my gosh, did you hear July 12th? Like, I mean, not to repeat it to my birthday, but like never in a million years did I ever think in my life I would be picking fruit in the second week of July. It's crazy.
And I know Dahlia wants to know, was July 12th your 28th birthday or 29th?
I'm going to keep that secret.
Okay, good. That is a good point.
Let's say 28 plus 11.
There you go. Happy birthday. Big time. All right. I want to get into tonight's wine because it is a fantastic wine. And it's funny because I know you as a just dyed-in-the-wool Pinot producer for that magical fruit and that challenge that you love. This one is not a Pinot. This is Franklin's Cuvée. And I teased it earlier. the name Franklin is different and unique, but the label also is pretty darn special. So walk us through who Franklin is.
Yes. So, and we can go look at my other labels too, because I kind of want to give an explanation of what we did with the label here. And I see my cousin is on the call too, Kate. I can see you. Hi, I love you. She is an amazing artist, and she did the watercolor on all of my labels. So we try to keep everything in the family, but keeping with the family, Franklin is my grandpa. We call him Papa. I wish he could have been here tonight. But he told me he doesn't know how to Zoom, so he'll have to watch it later. I'll send it to him.
I can introduce him to Robert from Bottega del Vino, inside story that Cellar Angels folks will know, and he can teach him how to Zoom.
Cool.
It won't end well.
Oh,
Jackie.
great. Well, so my grandpa is one of my partners in the brand, my grandpa and my dad, and they kind of have been supporting me through this journey. And my grandpa is probably, I just love him so much. I knew one day that I would make a Bordeaux wine for him. I just didn't know when or how or any of that. But I just remember as a kid, like going over to their house, and they always had the most beautiful like Bordeaux wines at dinner, and kind of getting to talk to my grandpa as I got older. I found out he's a geologist, and he was in oil and gas, and he was transferred over to Bordeaux, and they lived a little bit in Bordeaux when my dad was young.
Back up. So you grew up in Houston, and your grandfather was transferred from Houston to Bordeaux.
Well, I think they were up north. He's from Wisconsin, but I think this was before they were in Houston. So this was when my dad was young. So this was like probably in the 60s or so. They were transferred.
How do I not? First of all, I don't have an aunt like one of your aunts that pushes me into the wine industry. I don't have a grandpa. That's incredible.
That was awesome. And they lived in Pesic, and they actually lived, he said from where they lived, they could see Chateau Haut-Brion, like from their balcony. And he's like, my grandma, he's like, she fell in love with all the premier crus because they lived right across, they were right there in, the prime of Bordeaux. And so
even though Grandpa Franklin can't be with us, do you have a picture of him?
Oh yeah, I do. It's an old photo, but this is my Papa and my Mima back in the day. I don't know with the glare if y'all could see that, but
put it up a little close. There you go.
That's a pretty typical face he makes. You got to get him smiling every once in a while, but he's wonderful. He's so great. But he was over there working for Exxon at the time. And so he just had told me so many wonderful stories, and just growing up, like always had, they had wine in the house all the time growing up. And like someday when the time is right, I'm going to make a Bordeaux wine and name it after my grandpa. And so his middle name is Franklin. It's Jan Franklin. So here's Franklin's blend. And this is the 2018. This has almost all of the Bordeaux varietals. It's 4 of the 5. And then we made a 19 that has the 5 Bordeaux varietals. So really excited about this wine. And
we opened it about an hour before sip, just from a pure planning standpoint, not meaning to decant or anything like that. And as soon as we were walking down the hall, I said, wow, this thing is just exploding from the glass. So this has got some power, some finesse, 75% Cab Sauv, 10% Cabernet Franc, and 10% Petit Verdot, and 5% Merlot. And I think it's great, given your 15, 16, 17, 18-year history in Dry Creek, that you know where you want to source these vineyards from. So talk to us a little bit about the vineyards you chose for this blend, and then we'll get into the portfolio.
Right. Well, it actually kind of was a luck thing. Like I said, I have.
Dad, don't sell yourself short. Luck is the residue of hard work.
My I guess you could say flagship wine is Pinot Noir. I love making Pinot. It's kind of like I guess one of the most challenging grapes to grow, but I just love Pinot Noir. But I knew I wanted to make something that also packed a punch. And working in Dry Creek for so long, I just knew, and working at Moritzen, they have a lot of rock pile fruit. So if you're familiar at all with the Sonoma County, Healdsburg area, or Lake Sonoma, rock pile is a small appellation above Lake Sonoma. It's about 700 feet above sea level, really beautiful. All of it's above the inversion layer, so it doesn't see any of the fog. So it sits right above the fog layer. So it's getting constant sun, constant stress, all of that. This vineyard that I got the all of the varietals except for the Merlot was really close to Rockpile. It's still considered Dry Creek Valley, but it's right on the edge of the lake. Like you can see Lake Sonoma from the vineyard, and it's all high elevation, hillside fruit, beautiful. And I just had tasted through their wines, like if you guys know the history of, you know, obviously everyone does it, of what's been going on in California the last couple of years, you know, with the wildfires. They were kind of done after a certain point because the fires did get pretty bad up there, and they had a bunch of fruit for sale. And so I was like, okay, this is my chance. This is the time is now. So that kind of spread, like, I guess sped it up a little bit of like, okay, I'm going to get this fruit. And then that's kind of why I guess you could say.
No, it's great. And before Jeff chastises me for, boy, it would be nice, Martin, if you showed us where Rockpile and where these wineries were. I need to show everyone where these wineries are. So we do a little thing here at Cellar Angels called Google Earth. It is without question one of the greatest training aids that we have because visuals are much better than me talking. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, Cellar Angels focuses on one region and one region only, and that's Napa and Sonoma. It is without doubt one of the greatest wine regions in the world. And part of it is what Jackie alluded to a second ago with regards to soils. So now Dry Creek is just outside of Healdsburg in that area. But this gives you an idea of Napa and the size of Sonoma. An interesting fun fact, since Jackie mentioned Bordeaux, Napa is 1/8 the size of Bordeaux. So Napa has about 40,000 acres of vineyards. Bordeaux has about 260,000 acres of vineyards. So Bordeaux is considerably larger. But if I look at where Jackie started her second business, we go to Comstock. Comstock is on Dry Creek Road. If I were to go up a little bit further, half a mile, many of you would recognize the rosemary roof on the right-hand side from Knoll. But this is where you sourced most of your fruit from for this wine?
No, this is the Merlot. So right behind the winery, yeah. So right in between the two structures is the whole Merlot block. So right here behind, yeah, other way. Keep going. Yes, over one. Like, see the two? Yeah, right there. There it is. That's the Merlot right there. And so Comstock Winery was the winery I just left to come out to Texas. I was there for 6 years and I loved it. And every time we would do our Merlot vintage, it was just one of the best Merlots I've ever had. And I know Merlot got a bad rap back in the day with Sideways, but I'm like, Merlot is great. And I knew just getting the other fruit from Gustafson up north, it just needed a little lift of fruit, and the Merlot there is just fabulous. So I know it's only 5%, but it really helped carry this blend.
Hey, Kleins, this is a family show. Put some clothes on that child. All right, let's show you where the rest of this fruit comes from, because to give you an idea, she goes, it's just a little bit up north. Yeah, it is. So, by the way, another fun fact, Dry Creek Valley is one of the smallest, if not the smallest AVAs in Sonoma. It's 16 miles long from ridge line to ridge line, but the narrowness of the growing region is even less than that. And it's also a really bizarre area of soils, so much so that you have tectonic shifts over the years where you have upfolds coming over, getting pushed up and then folding back on top of each other. So you've got a lot of alluvial fans, a lot of benchland, a lot of gravel, a lot of sand. And you look at Knights Valley, which is not that far away. Knights Valley is mostly volcanic. You look at Russian River Valley, which is just to the left and south. It is mainly sandy loam. But if you look at Dry Creek is more of a conglomerate of all these things because of the different folds from the tectonic. And so this is Gustafson family wines up here, and it gets crazy when you think about how far away it is from Comstock. So this was just pure luck and happenstance. You said, okay, there's some fruit available up there because of the fires, and I want to jump at this chance.
Yeah, I mean, just the wine industry, it really is a small industry. You think it's huge, but it really is small. So when people are selling things, or people, or people looking, or our cellar master is friends with this person that's friends with this person, and they have fruit available, you find out. And so that year I was just kind of itching to do it, and that he like brought samples, and I'm like, hey, like, I want to try it. Like, he brought him for our other owner, and I'm like, why not? And so I tried it, and I'm like, our winemaker didn't want them. And I was like, these are perfect. And so it just kind of worked out. You just never know when the timing's going to be right. So.
And Jackie mentioned earlier that it overlooks Lake Sonoma. So to give you an idea of what this looks like, the topography and relief is pretty stunning.
It's beautiful up there. It's amazing.
And so you have Lake Sonoma over here. Oops, I put the wrong one on photos. And you have GFW right here, but you have some incredible photos that folks have taken while staying there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is spectacular. Very, very, it's the highest elevated winery and vineyards aside from Rockpile in Dry Creek. And you get some beautiful fall foliage. And last but not least, this picture actually just gives you an idea of what it looks like from a home that they have available to stay in VRBO. That's not a bad view to wake up to or go to sleep to. They got hit very, very hard in the fire, as Jackie had said, and burned down a lot of the barns, lost a lot of equipment, lost the winemaker's house. And so that's where this fruit became available. Super, super nice family bought the vineyard land in 2003. Just an amazing property up there, but boy, very far north Sonoma County area, and you get to see just these views are spectacular. And if you zoom in on this hillside, this is where you get a chance to see kind of the slope and elevation changes of the property, and essentially all of the different soil types that could possibly be in here. Really, really magical place.
It really is. I mean, it is amazing. When we went up there for the first time, I mean, I'd been up to Rockpile many times when I worked with Moritzen, but I had never been to that winery, and it's just breathtaking. It's amazing. And just to see like, oh, wow, like how beautiful the vineyards are there. It's magical. It really is.
So walk us through, we've got Franklin's Cuvée, which is just mesmerizingly good. By the way, it's incredible. Give us a shout out of the rest of the portfolio.
Okay, so real quick, right now for the Jaclynn Renée label, we are doing a rosé. So, and again, my cousin did all the watercolor on the label. So again, to go with my roots, being from Texas. So this is a girl on the horse and the vineyards, kind of to pay homage to my Texas roots, but Jaclynn Renée rosé. This is Pinot Noir and Zen. And then,
so I need a Aunt Robin and a cousin Kate in my family.
Yeah,
go on.
And a grandpa, and then I have
and a grandpa.
Seriously. The Chardonnay was also for Papa because he wanted me to make a Chardonnay for him that was kind of a little bit oaked, not overly oaked or stainless. So, and then Yellow Rose of Texas, for obviously being from Texas too. And then my Pinot Noir from Botch, and that's from San Giacomo Vineyards, my Chardonnay. And then the Pinot Noir is one of my favorites. This is from Botch Vineyards in Russian River Valley. And again, I make really, I would say, precise, like feminine wines. I mean, they're in the labels kind of I match that as well. And then again, with the Franklin's blend, we kind of changed up the label from doing the Yellow Rose of Texas because it is a blend. We put a blend of Texas and California wildflowers on it. So it's kind of a blend of me, of my California and my Texas now. So we have a few different, we have the poppies and all of that, and a few Texas wildflowers as well. So kind of to kind of pay homage, I guess, to me too, for both my Texas roots and my time in California.
I would love to see if anybody who hasn't asked a question in the chat. Well, there is one about the fruit being impacted by the fires. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. At Gustafson, it was very much impacted by the fires. They lost the entire 2020 vintage up there. And they lost a I don't know if you would call it an heirloom tree, a madrone tree that had been there for, oh my God, it looks like it was over 100 years old. And I guess the vineyards, Jackie, take some time to recover. I mean, luckily the vineyards are 95% water. And so the first few rows usually get scorched. So what is that recovery process?
Right. It really doesn't. I mean, honestly, you would be very surprised if you were to drive in wine country, like with the fires. Like it really burns like everything but the vineyards because you're irrigating constantly, and the leaves and everything have so much water in through irrigation and all of that. There is a little damage, of course, but it's the more of the damage we're seeing and the reasons we're not harvesting in years like 2020 and 2017 and those big fire years is because of smoke damage. That is the damage that is doing more than the actual fire flame damage is smoke taint. And that's a hard thing to recover from. Like in 20, we had growers calling us, just telling us, hey, we can get more insurance, like if you just don't pick it, because what are you going to do? Like we don't want our name on your label, like we were talking about single vineyard earlier, if you're going to make smoke taint wine out of these grapes, so it'd be better if you just don't pick them, in those kind of years, because it's their reputation. It's our reputation. You don't want to make beautiful, consistent wine and then have a year that, it's completely smoke taint. And so in a year like 2020, we pretty much had no reds coming in. We had mainly only whites. And then I was lucky in 2020, my Pinot Noir came in the day of the fires. We brought it in, it was like a happy morning. And then in the afternoon, the fire started. It was like flames everywhere. And it's like, okay, well, that was lucky. But at the same time, not everybody was so lucky. It's just kind of those kind of things you have to deal with and mitigate. And
for many of the angels that are traveling out to wine country in the next 3 to 6 months, how do they taste with you?
So, well, you could be traveling in Texas wine country, or you could be traveling in California wine country. California, we're actually moving the whole brand to Texas right now. So we won't really have any potential to taste out in California right now. We are really small. I only make about 700 cases, so we're tiny. So the best way to taste our wines is to join our wine club or just to buy online, direct to consumer. That's the best way to get our wines because we are so small and we sell out quickly. Because I'm from Texas, we do have a little bit of our wines, just a tiny amount in distribution, mainly in Houston, a little bit in the Austin area. But mostly wine club is the main way. And also just joining our mailing list. Go online to jaclynnreneewines.com, join our mailing list. We're going to start doing a lot more events. And you can find out more about wine club and things like that. And since we are moving the brand to Texas, I mean, we're still going to have the California label and still make the California wines. We're just moving the inventory here. We're going to be doing a lot more events here. And if you're in the Driftwood area, come to Driftwood Estate Winery, come see me, send me an email and say you're going to come up, and we could always taste my wines too and taste the Driftwood wines and say hello. But something super exciting, we just crushed two of our new wines for the new Texas label for Jaclynn Renée, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. On this past Monday, we crushed some Mourvedre, which is kind of like the Texas Pinot kind of. So I'm really excited to do that. And then we're going to do, and I also crushed some Cabernet yesterday. So really excited to start a Texas label as well.
Super cool. And Lori is very close by in Fredericksburg, so she's going to come meet you.
Come say hi, Lori. Email me. Hi, Lori. Come say hi.
Cousin Kate dropped a Jane Austen huge factoid right there, so that's impressive. Big fan of that. It has come to that time of the show where we have to let Jackie get the grape guts out of her hair.
Oh yeah.
So
as I saw my husband's on the call too. So hi, hey babe, thanks for taking the kids so we can have a quiet Zoom meeting. I have two little ones too. I have a Maddie and Dean who are 8 and 4, and then we just got a little GSP puppy, so we had to have a quiet house. So thanks, babe, for taking them and supporting me through this journey too.
No, and that's hysterical, but also incredible that this gives you a great indication of just what family winemaking is all about. Angels, you guys are the ones that make the difference. Jackie and team, thank you so much for allowing us into your living room, quite honestly.
Yes.
And there is just so much pride, so much passion in this label. And I love that you spent 15, 16 years in the Healdsburg area, Dry Creek. You learned from some of the best at Morton and Comstock, and now you had some access to some amazing fruit. You made it worthwhile. And because of how you were raised, you're paying homage to the folks that got you into the industry and paying it back. And that is something special and something we like to honor. So I'm going to raise a glass to Jackie, who is just incredible. Also, you can find your SIP interviews and episodes. If you are not subscribed to the Cellar Angels YouTube channel, please do so. We come up, Jackie is episode 105, by the way. She was also episode 5. So she was brave enough in April of 2020 when the world was hitting the blank show. And she said, you know what, I'm going to go on camera and talk about wine, because that's when SIP started, because we all needed to commune together and be with one another and not let the socialization aspect go away. And boy, we've said it for 20 years. Wine brings people together, but great wine brings great people together. And Angels, that is you. So next week, we are going to be proud to be joined by a new Angel partner, Ketchum Estates, and Allie Ketchum, who you are going to want to see, because this young lady, she does have a Grateful Dead fanatic obsession. So it's impressive. And she also is in Sonoma, Jackie.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I don't know, she's on West Side Road, I think. But this is episode 105 signing off. Where did all the good people go? Jack Johnson likes to ask. They're all here on SIP Friday nights. Cheers,
Thanks
everyone.
for having me, y'all. Thank you, everyone. Happy Friday.
Be good. Stay safe.
Bye, y'all.